a thought-inspiring conversation. You've heard plenty today. Here's one more. For the last 1.5 years, we've been talking about one topic day in and day out, and that's the pandemic. The way that we have worked, the way that we think, everything seems to have changed. Um, some things which we never thought about have become very pressing thoughts that we need to think about. And well-being is someone that is something that everyone is kind of waking up to. So joining me for this conversation today on pandemic, work from home, and mental health is Suman. I'm sure a lot of you have already heard about Suman, but let me kind of introduce her to you today. Suman Gopalan is the Chief HR Officer at Freshworks, spearheading the global team to support companies' global people strategy to engage, develop, and care for its 3,500 plus employees. Suman and her teams manage talent acquisition, leadership and organization development, employee experience, employee rewards, culture, workplace experience, social impact, and diversity and inclusion. At Freshworks, Suman has played a crucial role in supporting the company's rapid growth with innovative practices to attract and retain top-tier talent while strengthening the company's culture that creates a happy workplace environment. She also championed the diversity and inclusion program at Freshworks, hiring over 1,000 women in 2020, putting Freshworks ahead of the industry average. Under her leadership, the company adopted a variety of innovation initiatives for physical and mental well-being of the employees. Virtual meditation, yoga classes, and a cooking school are standout initiatives alongside an internal hashtag and It's OK campaign that emphasize the mental well-being, or the importance of mental well-being for every employee during the pandemic. Because of these successes, Freshwork was named by Battery Ventures and Glassdoor as one of the top 25 companies to work for during the pandemic. Previously, Suman has led the global and regional HR teams of Nielsen Company, Dell Technologies, Whirlpool. Suman is sought after HR thought leader and widely quoted in the media. She holds an MBA in human resource from Exilera Jamshedpur, is an active mentor for young women leaders, and the co-founder of the ACT Women Initiative. Thank you so much for joining us, Suman. Welcome.
Thank you, Jess. Lovely to be here. Thank you for that kind introduction.
Oh, you're welcome, Suman. I think it's going to be a very interesting one. There are a lot of things that I want to ask you about some of the stuff that you've done. And, life a year and a half ago was very different. And suddenly, what started off probably at a cruise ship somewhere for me, so for China, for in a wet market in China, for somewhere for some other people, kind of has turned everything around. And the first reactions was to safeguard ourselves and safeguard our families. But as a leader in an organization, I'm sure the thought of safeguarding was much more than just safeguarding you, yourself, and your family. So what was the reaction? What were the first reactions that you had when the news of the pandemic hit?
We were actually tracking the spread of the pandemic, I think from late Jan, early February last year, when we started seeing in the news that, this was spreading across, because our teams travel across the world, and we wanted to make sure that we were keeping a watch on how the situation pans out and what advisory we should issue, etc. So that was really our initial thought when we saw that, early January, we started seeing the reports. But towards the later part of February, it was becoming clearer that, it was becoming widespread. Fortunately or unfortunately, Chennai where we are headquartered, has witnessed quite a few of these natural calamities in the last few years, right? We had the Chennai floods, we had, the cyclone Varda. So thanks to that, we've had very solid BCP plans, business continuity plans across the company. Our initial thought was, we will revoke or invoke the BCP plan. And it was going to be for a period of about 2 months or so until, this virus goes away. That's kind of how we thought about it. Most of the world thought about it that way as well, I guess. But our initial focus was, let's make sure that we optimize for the safety of all our employees, right? So even before countries started issuing travel advisories and lockdowns, we went into a work from home mode pretty early on. Right from early March, we were actually ready to trigger it. And then when we saw that it was becoming a global phenomenon, we made all our employees work from home proactively, because nothing is more important to us than the safety of our employees. And honestly, being in a technology company, we can pretty much work from anywhere. So we made sure that, connectivity is often the biggest issue. And so we made sure that whoever had connectivity challenges, we gave them, whether they needed dongles or whatever apparatus they needed. So everybody could be productive from wherever they are. So that was our initial response, is let's be proactive. Let's not put our people in the harm's way. Let's continue to work from home and, be in this mode for a few months, and then we'll be back. That's the simple thought that we all had about a year and a half ago.
Yeah, I think when it started, it all looked very simple. So yes, safety came first, and hence everybody moved on to work from home. And we all thought that that's going to help us. But slowly and steadily, the fear, the worry, the stress started to grow, and the perils of work from home started to kind of have its impact on people. And that's when mental health of employees was being talked about. So what trends did you see which made you alert about the mental health issues that your employees may experience?
Right. Like I said, the first phase was, response to the pandemic, right? Making sure that everybody was safe, etc. Our primary focus was making sure that people are safe, people are productive. And when we figured that it was going to be beyond a month, maybe 2 months or so, our focus was on making sure that, people were able to be happy in the workspace that they are in. And so that was our initial reaction to it. But over time, as we realized that this ain't going away in a month or two, it was going to be 6 months or longer, we wanted to make sure that we are able to stay connected, right? As a company, we've always been very, very close knit. Our employees across the world, we've all worked very, very closely together. And suddenly that physical contact is lost, right? So we did a number of things to make sure we are still able to retain that camaraderie. So what actually happened was we were maintaining having frequent conversations with our people. Our CEO had weekly town halls. We would get on a daily exercise regimen together as a company at 6 o'clock in the evening. We had these little groups on workplace where people, who had common interests would come together. So we were really making sure that connection was there and people weren't missing out on that. What that did was it enabled us to really listen to how employees were feeling. And we quickly realized that this wasn't about physical wellness anymore, which was our first reaction, right? Which is why we did yoga and all of that together, and exercises, nutrition, and making sure we remain fit, all of that stuff. But we realized that, look, at the core of it, humans are social beings, right? And when you take away all forms of social interaction, this is not just with your work colleagues, it's with your friends, with your family, with your neighbors, even with the newspaper folks who deliver newspapers, all forms of human interaction is lost. That's when we realized that we are in for a different kind of challenge. And we started picking up trends that we saw as employees were talking to us about, the challenges that they were facing, the stress they were undergoing. And we really quickly worked to make sure that we were addressing proactively what prolonged isolation can do to mental health and mental wellness. And so we always had a pretty healthy discussion on this topic, but we amped it up. We have an mental well-being helpline. We also have internal folks who support our employees on that. So we just amped it all up and made sure that employees have the avenues that they need to seek help on this. It still is going on. It's not over as yet, but it is a huge focus for us. We want to make sure that this doesn't have lasting impact on any of us.
So tell me a little bit more about the hashtag you're not alone and hashtag and it's okay.
Right.
Very, very in sync with the time. So how did that thought come about, and what was the response that you got for it?
So two campaigns, right? First, when we started working from home, we were invading our family's space, right? All of a sudden appeared with our laptops and plonked ourselves in the living rooms and the dining rooms, etc. And we were telling all of them to keep quiet. Like my daughter would have her school, or we'd have my mother-in-law would be cooking. All sounds that naturally happen at home suddenly became a big deal, right? But it's part of life. And I think you have to realize that we have to be incredibly grateful to all our family members who've been supportive, that we've been able to work seamlessly. And so we found that all employees were feeling a little, what should I say, anxious, that they weren't able to present their usual professional selves. And so that's when we started this campaign of "And It's Okay," to basically normalize the fact that it is okay when your kid comes in. It is okay when you have folks cooking in the kitchen, and you have that ambient noise at home. It is okay when we can see your parents and your spouse move around the house. So all of us did this "And It's Okay" campaign, right? To let employees know that it's life. You don't have to be apologetic about it. So for instance, I have to cook at home. So I have to also take calls. So while I'm cooking, I can also take calls. It is normal, right? I don't have to be apologetic. So all of us, irrespective of our experience, our level, anything, we all had this. So that's what triggered the "And It's Okay" campaign. We encouraged people to post pictures of what they considered as embarrassing moments, and we normalized it. And
That's
everybody
brilliant. I think I'm sure the response that you would have gotten for your employees would have been great.
Yes, and people loved it because it's the same for everybody. I have it, our CEO has it, and so anybody can have it, right? It's part of life. So that was the first thing we did. We told employees not to sweat over these, okay? It's perfectly fine. And we said thank you to all their family members for the chaos we were creating in their homes, right? The second one was "You're Not Alone." When we found that many people had what they thought was unique challenges, like for instance, young parents. You know, when you have children who are slightly older, they're obviously using their online education to its best. But when you have really young kids, there's no online education, right? All your play schools, everything is shut. What do you do? Right? Literally, your toddler needs your attention. You cannot tell him or her, sorry, wait until my conference call is over. Or, in the lockdown, you don't have helpers at home. You have to do everything. Many people had challenges that were extreme. And what we tried to tell everybody was, you're not alone, right? Any kind of challenge, whether it was, just young parents struggling to balance. We saw in some situations where domestic violence increased. We saw situations where people were really impacted by this isolation, and their existing mental health suffered even more. So we wanted to make sure that people felt okay to talk about it. And so that's when we created this "You're Not Alone" campaign, for people to know that we are here and they don't have to go through all of this alone, and that we are here to support. And we had various groups that formed where we tried to help them whatever way we can. We thought of some creative solutions, like for young kids, can one of us take time out to read a story so that, their harried parents can get at least some time to themselves. So we came up with some really, innovative ways of helping our own colleagues out. And that was the whole campaign around "You're Not Alone," right? All of these are common problems. Sometimes we feel that, it's unique to us and that we have it probably worse than the others, but know that there is somebody else or the other who's facing that. And we're all in the same boat. So we're here to help. So that, those were the two internal campaigns we did to let employees know that we're all here, and just really gave them a sense of support, a sense of security that we're here to look after them.
Yeah, I can completely relate to the fact that all of us have gone through wanting to look for support, even though we were bound in our own homes, and work was getting onto us, and family life was more chaotic than what we'd ever experienced. And yes, I think so, if a support group was formed wherein I could just be me and not have to live up to a corporate persona that I also carry, that would have been very, very calming for people.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I also read that you've hired about 1,000 plus women in 2020, and that was the time when the pandemic had hit. And there was a study done by McKinsey which said that because of the pressures of work and childcare and the housework pressure, a lot of women are wanting to step down and give up their careers. And I think the study said 1 in 4 women is seriously thinking about giving it up. So what do you think the organizations can do to kind of stop this in its tracks?
One correction, we did not hire 1,000 women. We
Okay.
hired about 500 plus some number. We crossed 1,000 women. So our
Oh,
aim
okay.
was at least a third of our organization should be women, because
Mm-hmm.
honestly, what we aim for is parity, right? If you don't have parity, you shouldn't talk about being diverse, etc.
Yes, yes.
But you can't achieve it overnight. We made a public pledge that
Mm-hmm.
in 1 year we'll at least be about a third of our organization being gender diverse. And so that's when we crossed that magical number of 1,000 out of our 3,000 employees and all of that. So
Okay.
but back to your question, right? We took a pledge before the pandemic. Right
Okay.
after that, the pandemic hit. So in fact, we took it in the first week of March,
Mm-hmm.
right? And our CEO and I, we went and said that, truly, this is what we aim to do. And we want to make sure that by this time next year, at least a third of our, workforce globally will be women. And in a week's time, we were all going into work from home, and we were figuring out what is going to be the impact on our business. Are things going to slow down? Hiring, can we effectively do it? Because people are everywhere. How do you schedule all of that stuff? But honestly, we found great talent everywhere. If there is one thing, if there's one good that this situation has shown us, is that working remote is not a bad idea. So many companies have been reticent about experimenting with it, primarily because we all have this belief that when we work face to face, we do better work. There's merit in that. I don't deny that. But it's not so bad when you have really talented people who want to, for their personal preference, work from elsewhere, but they bring a lot of value to the table, right? So we stopped putting these artificial boundaries on what we require for a role, and we really found we were able to hire some very, very talented women. Of course, it was a concerted effort. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And so we all had we all had targets that we were thinking about for our own team, depending on how good or bad we were to start with. And so we were honestly able to do a lot. And we want to do a lot more, because this opens up the opportunity for us to tap into talent that can basically sit anywhere. So often you see women taking a break in their career because, for life reasons, etc. And then very often, because their spouse moves to some other location, they generally have to make that choice as well. Now you don't have to, right? You can work from anywhere. So that's the biggest hope that I have, that we will be able to attract a lot more talented women into the workforce as well. And so that's the one thing I would say that pandemic has done really well in terms of shining the light on the possibilities.
Yeah. And what do you think the organizations can do to focus more on the mental well-being of employees who are actually feeling the brunt of it?
First and foremost, before you do anything, you have to sensitize the entire organization about what we mean by mental well-being, right? Because it is not one person's problem to solve, right? It is ours as an organization to support, right? And so that's the first thing, that you have to make it okay for people to talk about it, right? Just offering help or a helpline is one solution, but it's not the only solution that you can have. So first and foremost, you have to create an atmosphere where it's okay for people to come up and talk about it, without feeling any hesitation about it. Two, you have to sensitize managers and leaders about what does it mean, right? What are the kinds of challenges that people undergo? How do you look for signs? And what do you do when you see those signs? Or what do you do when somebody walks up to you and says, I am feeling stressed, right? Very often you'll be amazed. We all say the wrong things to them, right? And that just turns off people, and they never speak up. So the first thing we can do as organizations is break down the stigma that is generally associated with mental health. Mental health is just like physical health, right? It is a part of our overall well-being, right? And so if you make it normal for people to talk about it, and people to be able to approach their managers and have a conversation, that's the first thing you can do to support them. The second thing is you have to offer specialized help. I don't think you should leave it up to managers to kind of, do their best or reinvent it. They are just like how when you are unwell, right? Just like how when you're unwell, you go see a doctor and you figure out, what is the ailment, what is the cure for it. Exactly like that for mental health, there is cure, there is support, there is diagnosis. We should treat it exactly the same way, right? No stigma, nothing. Is something that is curable for so many folks in so many ways. That's the approach we have taken towards mental health, is to make sure that we focus on the overall well-being of our employees. And this is a significant part of it. And so we make it perfectly okay. We talk to managers regularly about it. And now we've actually even formed a support group. Just like how you find, there are support groups when you go on a diet, for instance, right? Similarly, we have this. It's entirely voluntary. People who feel like they want to talk about it are seeking help amongst their colleagues. We have small groups of about 8 to 10 people who meet, who talk about things, who support each other, completely confidential. But that's kind of how we want to make sure that it's a supportive environment at work as well for it.
No, and I think the bigger challenge, like you said, is uh, for people to get rid of the biases that they have when it comes to mental health. I think just like we keep talking about unconscious biases when talk about gender diversity, I think a bigger issue is that people probably do not feel it's okay if someone has an issue when it comes to anything to do with stress or anxiety or whatever. We kind of label people. So I think making managers aware and and not holding them responsible to give a solution, because they probably would not know what to do. So I think it's a very, very great step that you've taken, that engage the professional, because that's the job that they would need to do.
Yes, and be supportive.
And
That's
be
all it
supportive.
is.
Yes. Yeah, so hopefully work cultures built on those thought processes will make sure that women who are struggling right now because of the pandemic would not struggle and would want to retain the jobs and the careers which they have, and continue to shine. um, the other thing that I wanted to check with you is, I was reading this article the other day that some employees from Apple have written an open letter to Tim Cook saying that they don't want to return to a physical office in September, as was asked of them to do. What changes can we expect in the post-COVID world as far as workplace is concerned? What would workplace 2.0 look like?
That's $1 million question. Everybody is trying to figure out what it is going to look like, right? The one thing we know is that it's not going to be the same as it was before, right? And I think it would be a travesty after having gone through all of this to say that we want to get back to doing exactly the same thing and not take advantage of some of the realizations and the innovations that we have had as well. So to me, I see this in three phases, right? The first phase was honestly response to the pandemic. The second was recovery. The third is reimagining. And that's going to be the toughest one. The choice that employers will make and which will become, easier for them to make is what is it that you want to be as an organization? Some have said we want to be fully remote, right? Some companies have gone ahead and said we like what this experience has been. We like the fact that people can make choices based on their personal preferences. So you can choose to work from wherever you want. So some have said you can be fully remote, work from wherever you want. We will have no offices anywhere, no physical offices anywhere. Some have gone to the other extreme and said, no, we do well only when we are in a physical office, so you have to come back. Most will be in between, which is, it'll be a combination of in office, remote, some days in office, some days remote, etc. That's the easier choice to make depending on, your strategy, how work happens, etc. The difficult one are multiple aspects, especially when you decide you want to go hybrid, etc. One is you have to reimagine how work will happen, right? We're all used to a certain way of making things happen, how a sale happens, how a product is built. Our notion is about how it was pre-pandemic, right? Everybody in the office, this is how we built a product. Everybody in the office, this is how we completed a sale. When I needed an approval, I went here, I did that, done, right? Not going to happen that way when you're hybrid, right? The person you want may not sit next to you, all of that. So number one, you have to reimagine how work is going to happen for this to be successful. Because it's not job done with making a decision or remote, not remote, hybrid, etc. I think you will truly get the benefit when you can reimagine how work will happen. And two, when you can reimagine what employee experience is going to be. Because for most companies, employee experience was, brought to life in a physical environment, right? I would come into the office, I can feel the culture, I can see the culture in practice. I get to see I made so many, what should I say? I had so many takeaways about the company based on the physical environment and the experience I had. That's all gone, right? For most people, that's gone. So all of us, especially in my profession, when we talk about employee experience, the challenge for us is to think about what is that going to be when it is remote? How do you bring culture to life when someone you won't meet face to face is your colleague, right? How do you make sure the experience is the same for an employee in the office versus an employee who's working remote? The most important thing is how do you make sure there is no bias between employees you meet face to face or work face to face versus employees who you don't meet, right? So those are all big, big questions for us to unravel. That's why I said it's $1 million question. I don't believe anybody has a perfect answer to that. We will in about a year or two as we experience this, as we experiment with this. But right now, we're all trying to figure that out. And yes, I think folks at Apple had a point where we have learned so much about how work can happen asynchronously, how work can happen when you have distributed teams. Why lose the goodness of it, right? But ultimately, it will come down to who are you as a company? How would work happen for you?
I'm very intrigued with what you said, the employee experience. Um, you know, you connect with an organization because you can connect with its people and how the vibe of the organization. And currently, the only vibe I have is of my laptop, and
Yeah.
which is not a good vibe at all. So, how do you bring about the element of fun at work? You know, all those water cooler chats, your parties, your conversation, the jokes, everything is gone. They're just quick conversations, which are only work related. So I think, yes, for HR professionals, I don't envy you. You have your job cut out.
I think it's a very interesting time to be in HR. Like somebody said, in 2008, when we saw the whole financial crisis happen, etc., it was the CFO's job that came into the limelight. And companies had to really rethink about how they did their accounting and their financial practices, etc., and went through a whole different change. I think it's a similar time for HR professionals where front and center in this change and transformation. I think it'll be really interesting to see how we reimagine what work is going to be like, what employee experience is going to be like, what team building is going to be like, what organization processes are going to look like. I think it's a whole new definition that we will derive out of this.
Yes, I'm sure. I think it's going to be exciting to see the new trends. And I also feel that something that was never really talked about, or really, nobody gave attention to it. So it was well-being. Everybody kind of just shunned it off, saying, it is one of those cliched things everybody talks about. Yoga, meditation is good, but not necessary. And now you see everybody is taking it seriously. So do you feel that well-being is going to become a critical arm when it comes to the employee experience or employee management or training for managers how to handle their teams?
Absolutely. Today's employee base, I don't just want to say today's generation. I think every generation that's working today, it's true, right? It's no longer just about employee experience in the sense of, what's your career,
Mm.
right? Dial back 20 years, all of the conversation we had about employee experience was related to career experience, right? Now we've moved on from that. I think now it really is about employee well-being and well-being in every aspect. It is about your career, and how do we make sure that you are able to bring your best self and your whole self to work, right? How do we make sure that everybody has the opportunity to belong and thrive in our cultural environment, right? How do we make sure that, especially for our current sort of work ethic and work environment, a lot of the focus, a few years ago was on fancy offices, free food, foosball, all of that, right? Which is a great environment to attract talent. It's great for your brand. You attract a lot of visibility for your brand. All good, I'm not saying, but that's not the only thing. What becomes very important is physical and mental wellness. Because when you make a promise to your employees saying that you will create an organization where everybody can belong and thrive, it's not just about their career, it's not just about a great environment in terms of the office, but it truly is a space where they will thrive physically and mentally, right? So that's the promise that you're making, and you have to fulfill it in its entirety.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. And, even though there are a lot of things that we are, upset with COVID for and hate COVID for, but I think it's also kind of pushed us to think beyond our styles of working and living. And, after having this conversation with you, I feel that, the next 5 6 years and what the organizations, how they uh, will kind of rebrand, repackage their offerings is going to be something that I would, as an employee, be looking forward to experience. So thank you so much, Suman, for sharing your wisdom and your thoughts on things. And hopefully people who've been listening to us and organizations who've been listening to us will take some inputs and kind of ensure that organizations become a safe place, not only from a physical perspective, but also for mental health. Thank you so much, Suman, for joining us today.
Thank you, Jaskiran. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Steve, I think we're done.
Hi.
Hey.
So do I turn off the recording, Steve?
Yes, Sindhu, you can put off the recording.
Okay.
And once we end the call, I think it'll stores
Yeah.
in your cloud as happened in the morning.